Welcome to Education Program Online with me, Teacher Christine, taking you in mathematics for Senior 3 and Senior 4. So dear learners, our previous lesson was on limits, real functions and limits, and we completed that topic. So today we are starting a new topic, that is algebra. 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 So this is our new topic, algebra. Under algebra, we are going to look at what we call the equations, and specifically for the level of Senior 3 and Senior 4, we dwell on what we call the quadratic equations, because in Senior 1, Senior 2, you might have covered what we call the linear equations. So under this algebraic topic, we shall look at what we call the quadratic equations. Quadratic equations. Quadratic equations. Sometimes we say quadratic expressions and equations. Quadratic expressions and equations. So dear learners, looking at what we call the quadratic expressions and equations, you need to understand what do we mean by quadratic expressions, and then what is the equation. So when we look at what we call the quadratic expression or quadratic equations, these are expressions and equations of the certain degree. When you look at linear equations contain the power of 1. Those are, we treat them as simple problems. But when it comes to quadratic equations, these are bigger problems beyond one's ability, that requires some help from either colleagues or from the friends. So quadratic equations are those equations that are expressed, or that contains what we call the second degree. The second degree. So you say quadratic equations, quadratic equations are equations or expressions, of the second degree. So dear learners, when you look at a quadratic, you find that a quadratic equation, quadratic simply means the expression that contains the second degree. And then when we talk of equations, simply we say equation, these are asking statements. We normally say they are asking statement, because they always end with what? No answer, which is meaning they end with 0. So when we put them as quadratic equation, we say the equations and expressions of the second degree that end with 0 answer, because of the word equation, because the word equation comes from the word question, and equation simply means asking. So you ask when you don't know. So the same thing under algebraic, especially on quadratic, we are going to look at what we don't know. And then you say a quadratic expression, in x is of the form a form ax plus bx and then plus c, where a, b and c, a, b and c are integers. Integers with a not equals to 0. A not equals to 0. And x is a variable with the highest degree, a variable with the highest degree. E.g., we can have x squared plus 5x and then plus 6. Or you may have x squared plus 5. Or you may say, I will only have x squared. I will explain to you and then you'll understand. Then a quadratic equation in x is of a form ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0, where ax squared is the first term. And then we have bx is the second term. And then we have c is the third term. The third term, in bracket we say constant. constant. Lastly, we say quadratic equation. Quadratic equation. Take this one as note NB. Quadratic equation. Quadratic equation may have two or one or zero solution. Zero solution. Zero solutions. So dear learners, let me explain this part so that you can understand what we mean by a quadratic. So from our introduction, we said a quadratic expression and equations simply means expressions that contain the second degree. Why do we say they contain the second degree? Because we have different equations. We have linear equations. Those are equations that contains the first degree. And then when we move to a quadratic, then it becomes it moves to a second degree. So when you refer it to everyday life, we say these are questions or these are problems which are beyond one's ability. For example, when you look at linear equation, if you have stepped on someone and then you say, sorry, I've done something wrong, that is already you have solved that problem. But when it comes to a quadratic, it becomes like, for example, if you find somebody or your brother or your sister have been diagnosed as having HIV or cancer. So that one becomes a very big problem where you need to consult. So when you go for consultation, you will need to get the ideas how to go about with that issue, because we know cancer is beyond our level. So it may only require God to help us. So that is where we say we term it to be a quadratic equation. It is beyond you or is beyond one. It requires some help from others. So when we are expressing quadratic equation, we find that we express it in terms of terms. We have the first term, we have the second term, and then we have third term. Sometimes we may have only two terms, or we may have one term. But what does it contain? Does it contain a second degree? If it contains the second degree, then we say it is a quadratic. For example, we say when you look at it, this x squared plus 5x plus 6, this one automatically tells us this is a quadratic equation. Why? Because the first term contains the degree of 2. And then the third term will be containing the degree 1. And then we have the second term contains the degree 1, and then the third term does not contain any variable. Then sometimes we may find it expressed in this nature. It may be x squared plus 5, where we say this is, since the first term is raised by 2, it is a quadratic. Or you may find it as one term. Then you have to take note that all the quadratic equations or all the quadratic expressions are being expressed in this nature. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. Because why we say we quit it to 0, it is because of the word equation. Equation comes from the word equation, meaning you have no answer. If I say, what is your name? It means I don't know your name. And if you don't give me the name, then I remain with the answer 0. So that's why we put it to 0 because of the word equation. So here you need to understand these abbreviations. When you see A, it means it is the first term, a coefficient of x square, which is a first term. And then we have bx, which is the second term, and then c is the third term. Take note that these abbreviations A, B, C are coefficients. So A is a coefficient of x square, B is a coefficient of x, and C is a constant. So after knowing that, then you should know that when you are attacked or you fall into a quadratic problem, you have almost 3 options. You may have 2 solutions or 2 outcomes or solutions for that problem. Or you may only end up getting 1 solution, or you may completely get no solution. So that is what you need to take note of it, that any quadratic equation is not automatic that the answers are there or they have a fixed answer. It varies depending on which type of a quadratic that you are being affected. So you may get 2 solutions, you may get all the 2 solutions for your problem, or you may only get out of the 2, you may get only 1 solution, or you may get 0 solution. Then you say this is now beyond my level. So that is what you need to take note under a quadratic expression. So let us now look at the specific part. How do we handle the quadratic equations? How do we handle the quadratic equations? So dear learners, you should know that when I'm being affected by a quadratic problem, it does not mean that there is no solution. You need to seek for the solution. That's why we said from our introduction that when you are expressing a quadratic problem, you need it is beyond your level. You need to consult from your colleagues. And now when you are consulting, that means you will get either be advice that will leave you or that will not leave you. So when we are solving quadratic equations, we solve quadratic equation using many methods. So we have methods on how we handle the quadratic equations. So what we are moving to is to see the methods of solving quadratic equations. Methods of solving quadratic equation. Solving quadratic equations. Quadratic equations. So dear learners, that is where we are now moving to. Methods of solving quadratic equations. How do we solve quadratic equation mathematically? Mathematically, we look at the following methods. You have one by factorization. Factorization. By factorization method. We have 2 by perfect square method. 3 we have by completing the squares. And then 4 we have by graph method. We have by graph method. And then 5, we have what we call by general method. General method, sometimes we say general rule. Rule, or we say general formula. So, dear learners, those are the methods that we use for handling or solving the quadratic equation. The first one is by factorization. What does it mean? You factorize. Factorizing comes from the word factory. You factor. So you begin to break that number up to the level where it can no longer be broken. Then you can now be able to get the solution for it. And then when we have by perfect square, by completion, and then graph, and then lastly we have general method. So all these methods we are going to look at one by one. How do we use it? How do we apply it in the quadratic expression or quadratic equation? So we are starting with the method 1, that is by factorization. Factorization of quadratic expression. Factorization of quadratic expression. Quadratic expression or equations. So this is where we are starting. We are the first one. And then we go straight to the example. How do we example 1. So example 1, they would say solve or factorize x square plus 7x plus 6. Factorize x square plus 7x plus 6. So dear learners, if you are asked to factorize this, what you will do, we always, under factorization, we have other methods that we can use for factorization. We can use what we call error and trial method. Error and trial method involves you breaking the first term and the third term. And then you can also use what we call the quadratic method. So the quadratic method, we multiply the first term times the third term. And then after that, we get the factors of the product that you have got. So I always encourage you to use what we call the quadratic method. That is, we get A times C. A times C is the same as x square times 6, which will give us 6x square. So after getting that, we come here to get the factors of 6x square. The factors of 6x must drive you to this, the middle term. When you multiply them, you get the product, this first term, third term. And when you add them, it must give you what? The second term. So we shall find, when we multiply this, we get 6 and what? 6 and 1. So when I multiply this, I will get 6. And when I add it, I will get positive 7. So I will get positive 6 and positive 1. So this positive 6 and positive 1, because of this x, we simply say we shall have 6x and then what? An x, because it is 1. And then now after, After that, you now rewrite them. You'll now have come and say, I will have A plus B plus C. So the whole of this is our B. The factors that you have got is our B. So where there is A, you are going to rewrite this. You get x square, and then B, we have plus x, and then we have plus 6x, and then C, we have plus 6. So meaning that this is for A, this is for B, and this is for C. And our B is already given here as factors. Then now from here, that is now when you get what we call the common factors. Get common factors. Common factors. So the common factors here will now be, you break this, which will give you x. And then when we break this, we get 1 and x. And then here, when we look at this, we find the common factor here is x. So we shall have x, which is the common out, and then those which are not common, we put them inside, which will be x plus what? Plus 1. So for this pair, we have got this. Then we come to the second pair also, we break this, we get here 6 and what? 6 and x. And then when we break this, we get 6 and 1. We multiply this to get this. We multiply this to get that. Then now we look at the common factor. The common factor here is 6. So you cancel this 6. Is what we write outside. And then inside we shall have x and what? And 1. So learners, you will find that inside the bracket, the factors here must be the same. They must be the same. And then now you will now be able to express your factors as, you'll now collect the ones outside x and plus 6, because the 6 here is positive. Then put them in bracket, and then we have what? X plus 1. So that is what you have been asked. Please, they have just said factorize. So if you are to factorize, then you remain here. This is your answer. So that is your answer. Part B, sample 2, they would say factorize 2x, factorize 2b square plus 5 plus 5 plus 5b, and then minus 3 minus 3. So if we are given in this nature, still you also do the same steps. So when we come to our solution, we simply say our solution, we say A times C, and A is 2b squared times C, which is negative 3. So this will give us what? Negative 6b squared. Then now we look for the factors of negative 6. Factors of negative 6b squared. So we look at which numbers can we multiply to get 6. We find that we have, if we multiply them, it must give us negative 6. And when we add, it must give us what? Positive 5. It must give us positive 5. So our factors here will be now 1 and what? And 6. 1 and 6. So when we multiply this, we get 1. 6. But we shall not get negative 6. But when we add, it will not give us 5. So we shall have negative 1, which will now be negative b, and then 6b. Then now, after getting that, this is what we say, this is our second term. So we come and rewrite a plus b plus c. So where a, we are going to put 2b squared. And then we have minus b, and then plus 6b, and then minus 3. So dear learners, up to this level, you will now be able to pair them up. And then you will get the factors for that. So with this, learners, I hope we are going to pick up from here where we have stopped. We shall pick up from where we have stopped. But I want to request you to try to break this to get the common factors for these two expressions as following the first example. With this, learners, we have come to the end of our lesson. Remember, we are under algebra, which is first and quadratic equations and expressions. Thank you so much for your attention.